G'day guys, Nick Rusling from Johnston Grocke here with you today. Here we are, second update of the year. Look, over the past month and a half, we've really covered off on different investment strategies, the buy and hold, development, those sort of things. What I'm also wanted to give a bit of an update on today, it's pretty topical at the moment, is the property market as a whole, both Adelaide and Australia, and how those two sort of fit together, I suppose. Now, look, we've spoken lots about, market trends and property cycles. You've got your boom markets, your dead markets, slowing, rising markets, those sort of things. At the moment, as a country as a whole, we're probably seeing a bit of a slowing market, I suppose. We're certainly not down to any lows, like historically we've seen in that, but we certainly are in a slowing market. Now, what I want to emphasise in that is that obviously we do have the Australian market as a whole, but we also individually, per capital city, we've got our own markets. Sydney and Melbourne and the eastern seaboard, I suppose, as a whole really dominate the Australian market. That's where the vast majority of the population is, vast majority of sales, those sort of things. So at the moment, we're seeing Melbourne, they've probably seen the biggest hit. They're down at 5.93% currently. Their property market's fallen over the last 12 months. Sydney, they're down 1.48%, so not as bad, but still a drop there. Adelaide, on the other hand, we're bucking the trend a bit. We're up 1.1% currently as a whole over the last 12 months, which is really more a sign, not necessarily that we're seeing some huge growth or anything like that, but we're not actually seeing a decline either. We've still got some growth there, so we're much steadier, which is a really positive thing to take out of it. Where are we going to see property prices go over the next 6 to 12 months? If I knew the answers to it, would all be millionaires on here? I don't, but there's probably two large factors that I think are really going to impact property prices and the market as a whole, being the Royal Commission and the outcome of the federal election. Now, the Banking Royal Commission, the early sort of signs we're seeing, there's not going to be a massive focus on the home loan mortgage sector. However, as a whole, we probably will see some changes. So how living expenses and those sort of things, which I actually touched on in a video that will go up on the Johnston Grocke page as well, more so just how they're assessed now. Now, the banks probably won't be as willy-nilly, for a lack of a better term, as they've been in the past, but we probably won't see some huge recommendations come down that really restrict lending. So don't get too concerned about that. Probably more so the federal election. Now, I wouldn't normally be talking about the federal election if we were not almost all but 100% sure that there will be a change of government come the federal election. Now, Labor, have started to sort of release some signs that they're probably going to look at some capping on negative gearing and also the capital gains concession, how that impacts. Now, both of these things could have a really big influence on house prices. They could also have next to no influence. It really just depends what comes out. So nothing's guaranteed on any of that yet in terms of what we're going to see, but just things to be aware of and keep your eye on and start to, if you hear anything about policy changes, coming into an election year now, we all know we're going to hear lots about it in the media. So just keep your ear out for those sort of things and keep track of it. It's something certainly we'll want to. Back to the Adelaide market. Now, what I really want to emphasise here is that the Adelaide market, as all the capital cities are, is very separate to the Australian market as a whole. We're all individual in this. And we're seeing some great results down here at the moment. Realestate.com.au recently released some figures based around how many views each listing is actually getting, and then they put that down to capital cities. Now, in the past, Sydney and Melbourne have dominated this space purely based on the fact that they have larger population, more listings, more people, everything like that. Probably a bit of a sign of the slowing market, but currently Adelaide is on par with the eastern seaboard, being Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and actually stronger than Sydney in terms of views per listing at the moment, which is a really great sign to show that people in Adelaide, and that's not just to say that it's all Adelaide-based people, but they're interested in buying at the moment. They're looking, they're out there, and there's some great deals to be had out there at the moment. So really something that I sort of noticed and picked up in this article that actually is a really positive sign for us, and looking forward, we can hopefully keep those numbers up. Where's become, desirable, I suppose, for us to live? Now, that's always the question we're asked, what places are good, what places aren't. It's very specific to individual circumstances. So there's not one suburb that fits all. But something again that's really strong for Adelaide at the moment. We've seen the suburbs, the likes of Aldgate, Crayfors and Belair, currently in the top 10 most in-demand suburbs in Australia, according to realestate.com.au, with their statistics on how many views each listing up there is getting. Now, that's huge, Other ones that are up there are, your Middle Park and Albert Park in Melbourne, your Bondis, those sort of things in Sydney, all the high-flying suburbs. And to think that some small, Adelaide Hills suburbs are right up there is a really, really strong indication of how our market sort of holds steady throughout this. Look, we could go on more. We could talk about property cycles forever. What I do want to emphasise again, and Adam and I have both touched on it in videos in the past, is that we can't pick the property cycles. So don't base your whole assessment of buying on property cycles. What we can do though is recognise what part of the cycle we're at when you purchase. Now, right now, as I said, we're probably in that slowing market, certainly not a dead market down here. We're probably in a slowing sort of stagnate market at the moment here in Adelaide. So not necessarily a bad time to buy at all, but understanding everything in what comes with a market at that point really is key. So any questions whatsoever about any of this, any questions about anything to do with obtaining a loan and what I touched on with living expenses, if there's anything there you're concerned with, get in touch with us. We can talk about it with you, chat you through the best steps and make some plans from there. Have a great day. Cheers.